All right, I'm gonna do my next thing for the YouTube. I think I'm gonna talk about this. Something I wanted to do for a little while now. Y'all can feel free to say hi to YouTube again. I'm gonna shift gears a little bit. Someone mentioned Pew Pew used Nigel Thornberry earlier, and let me tell you, what an excellent segue into something I've been wanting to do for a little bit on stream now. Just a video I wanted to make about who I consider to be, because there was this little thing going on Twitter where basically it was who are the 5 greatest players from your, well, it started as country. The way this actually all started was Mackenzie started it in Europe, right? Mackenzie is ridiculously old school, extremely old school, long before my time. Shout outs to Mackenzie. I think he's with Polani Sports, but Mackenzie basically made this tweet that was like, my top 5 French players of all time, not in order. Mysterious, Clemj, Tech, Baxong, Poilon. And you, what is your top 5 players of all time in your country? So, I mean, I think for the United States, this is a little bit, you know, the top 5 players in the US are just, you know, it's like Mango, Plump, Mutaking, PP, Hungry Box or something. So it's like a little bit more kind of laid out for you. Like you're just looking at the global rankings at that point. But that's because the US is so big. But, you know, I think that when people started adopting this kind of format, because people, you know, it's cool to shout out players from your local scene and stuff like this. The equivalent to doing this in the US is essentially top 5 players from your region, because obviously the US is just a lot bigger and there's a lot more Smash players than European countries. So I wanted to make top 5 Melee players from, I should say, NorCal of all time. And I thought that'd be a fun video to make because I currently live in NorCal. I want to do more of these. I'm probably going to do one next week on who I consider to be. And I'm going to do a little bit more preparation for that one because I think that one's going to be more difficult to make. I want to do them for other regions I've lived in because I used to live in Washington. And I really want to do one for Japan. Top 5 Japanese players of all time. I think top 5 Japanese players of all time would be really fun. But for today, I'm going to do top 5. I got to start with the region I live in. So I'm going to do top 5 NorCal Smashers. For me, top 5 greatest of all time. And there's going to be some honorable mentions along the way. But without further ado, I guess let's get into it. Because this is actually going to be a tricky one. And there might be some players on that you might expect me to put on this list that you might be surprised that are either left out or they're honorable mentions or something like that. So, okay, my top 5, and I just want to make sure I have the exact people that I wanted to do on here. All right, this is going to be my top 5 NorCal Melee players across all time. And number 5 on the list, I'm going to go from, am I going to do this ordered? It's more fun if I do it in order, right? If I do some kind of order. Maybe don't consider it to be ordered because I haven't put too much thought in the order, to be perfectly honest with you. I think it's like, it's hard because the thing with orderings is that like I'm comparing players who are active essentially today to players that haven't really been at the peak of competition in many, many years. And at that point, it all comes down to what you value. So take the ordering here. Let's just say take the ordering with a grain of salt. Take the ordering with a grain of salt. Because it's, you know, you're comparing, you know, 2021, everyone knows how messy the GOAT discussions get. 2021 Mango, 2018 Armada, 2007 Mutaking, all this nonsense. I don't want to get into it, so I'm not gonna. Number 5 on the list, in no particular order, is Shroomed. I think this goes without saying. Shroomed is pretty much a household name in NorCal. And, you know, I gotta tell you, Shroomed is a very obvious pick for this list. Very obvious pick. I don't think this is coming as a surprise to fucking anybody. But Shroomed, if you ever talk to Homemade Waffles or listen to Homemade Waffles, Brandon, talk about Shroomed, he will tell you, Shroomed is classically underrated. Shroomed is always underrated. Shroomed literally like, or not underrated, but like people sleep on him. Shroomed is a player who, like, I think because of the way he plays, it's like, okay, look. If I wanted to literally list the best Sheik player in NorCal today, I wouldn't go with Shroomed. I'd go with Spark, probably, right? Spark, in my opinion, has reached higher highs, lifetime peak, I think, than Shroomed has. But when you look at the legacy, when you look at the results, when you look at also his dominance and how impressive he's been with many different characters. People forgot, like, man, Shroomed used to top 8 every fucking tournament with Dr. Mario. Literally every major. Shroomed was a lock for top 8, and he was a Dr. Mario main. I mean, that is actually absurd. Nobody has come anywhere close to that level with that character. Literally top 10 in the world with Talk. Let me see. SSBM rank 2013. Was he already playing? Yeah, he was literally, I mean, look, right? This is like a testament to, like, you know, I think these days people are like, oh, Shroomed, you know, that guy doesn't practice as much as he should, blah, blah, blah. He's too busy with his real job. You know, this is the 2013 SSBM rank. Shroomed was literally number 7 in the world, and his main character, he was starting to pick up Sheik and Marth, but his main character was definitely still Dr. Mario. And he was so good with Dr. Mario. Also, the fact that, I mean, we're looking at an all-time player list, Shroomed number 7 in the top 10. Top 7th place at anything in the world is ridiculous. It would be criminal if Shroomed didn't make this list. And to be perfectly honest with you, low-key, okay, I mean, we can get this out of the way. I feel like everyone knows that when you say the word NorCal, there's 3 players. In the modern era, there's 3 players that come to mind. SFAT, Pew Pew, Shroomed. I think Shroomed is low-key the most slept on out of those 3 players. I feel like SFAT and Pew Pew, maybe because of their team's dominance, you know, they put themselves out there a little more in terms of, like, you know, they don't stream that much anymore, but, like, they used, you know, people used to have a pretty poppin' stream and stuff like this. With Shroomed, I feel like he's a little bit more slept on, but, like, you cannot forget about this guy. And nothing epitomizes this better than this set right here. Genesis 7 Shroomed versus Swedish Delight. This set, first of all, I think I literally said it on the commentary. I was like, look, man,
it's better than.
It's literally the BRB dying. Thank you so much for the tier 1. Shroomed is the lowest lows of the 3. Well, Shroomed is the lowest lows of the 3 because he's, you know, for the longest time, he's been dedicated to just having a professional career. And you know, he works at NVIDIA, I believe, or at least used to work at NVIDIA. I think he might still work at NVIDIA. And he's the kind of player that, like, yeah, I mean, he's just had a lot more going on for a long time. But in spite of that, you know, also, we don't have to beat around the bush here. Shroomed likes to party, okay? Shroomed's the kind of guy, he's going to play really fucking well leading into Summit, and he's going to go to Summit, and he's going to hang out, and he's going to have a good time. And, you know, maybe he shows up to bracket a little bit. You know, maybe he didn't eat an apple that morning. You know, you never know. Is he going to eat an apple? Is he going to, you know, you don't know. Is he going to drink a bunch of, you know, alcohol and maybe wake up the next morning with a little bit of a headache? You're not sure. You're never sure which type of Shroomed you're going to get. But I think a lot of this is just because with Shroomed, I don't think he feels like he's got anything left to prove. But this set right here, I felt like going into this set, I was even saying on the commentary at some point, I said, look, okay, everyone knows the rule. You do not sleep on the kid. Never count Mango out. But let me tell you, there's like a little baby brother version of that rule. And it's don't ever count Dewan out. Dewan can always, when you least expect it. And by the way, Dewan Shroomed very famously, I think, a Sheik that really doesn't like the chain grab. Swedish, very, very good at chain grab Sheik dittos. And I'm just going to fast forward to the end of the set. And Shroomed has Swedish Delight by the balls. In a matchup that I think, you know, a lot of people looked at this, and this was super recent, 2020. And, yeah, I mean, Shroomed beat him solidly in the chain grabs on Sheik Ditto. And I think a lot of people didn't expect this, but, like, Shroomed literally, like, I mean, I asked him, like, you know, how much he practiced with this tournament. He's like, you know, I started playing with Zach and Kevin, like, 3 days ago. I was like, all right. Well, he practiced. Yeah, he basically practiced for a couple days. Like, if he's anywhere close to his form, like, he's a fucking monster. Game sense is incredibly, incredibly good. Sometimes out of the game, sometimes his decisions in terms of, like, character choice don't make that much sense. Like, I remember there was a tournament on the East Coast. It might have been a SmashCon, might have been a Shine. I don't quite remember, where he had to play Wizrobe. And for some fucking reason, this was back before he was known to have a very strong Marth. He was really more thought of as a Sheik main at this point. And he goes Marth, and he 3-0'd Wizrobe with Marth. And it made no fucking sense. People were like, why is he going Marth? Everyone knows if you've got a Marth and a Sheik, you know, Mutaking, Marth Sheik player, Mutaking goes Sheik for Falcon, because Sheik beats Falcon. And Dwan's like, nah, I'm feeling Marth. And he just goes Marth and clean sweeps Wizrobe 3-0. Made no fucking sense. So, you know, yeah, people meme on Shroomed sometimes because his lows are kind of low. But I think anyone who's been in the scene for long enough knows, like, you cannot ever count this guy out. You really can never count this guy out. So Shroomed, for all of his accomplishments, easy making this list. All right, for the next two, Well, listen, I'm just going to do them together, and I'm going to talk about them individually, but you guys can priority guess who the next two are going to be on this list. It really wouldn't make sense to not just round these two out, round out this kind of segment of the list with the next two players. And of course, I'm talking about PewFat. PBU and SFAT. Now, I'm going to talk about them separately. I'm not just going to talk about them as a team. First of all, it would be remiss of me to not mention their team's dominance, of course. Literally the best team in the world. Dominant over teams. Here's what I got to point out. I think PewFat at this point in 2021, PewFat is now known to be the best team in the world. They won so many teams tournaments. They were so good. You know, if you see PewFat playing in a double set, you basically think, okay, these guys are probably the favorites. But it wasn't always this way. Back in, 11, 12, 13, 14, every single doubles tournament back then was dominated by, it would always be a melee god. So the team that would win the tournament would be, if two melee gods team, they'd usually win. And then the other best teams were literally one melee god and someone else that they teamed with a lot. So Mango Lucky, incredible team. Probably the best team in the world back then. Mango Lucky, PPMD Loser, Hungry Buck started team with Plup. That team was ridiculous. Mewtwo King, Armada, I guess, were teaming. Mewtwo King would team with kind of several people. Mewtwo King Hacks were a team for a time. Armada Aniolus, later Armada Android, and of course Armada Mewtwo King. But every single dominant team, and you'd always see them fill all the top spots in the doubles bracket, would always be at least one god. At least one god, right? Left and Ice a little bit later, yeah. If you're counting Left and Ice as a god, which, which Plup isn't if you've heard the song. But yeah, PewFat was the team that not only broke this rule, but almost rewrote the rule, which was like, it's not good enough anymore. It is not good enough to just have a god on your team. That's not, because like they were barely even top 10 players. I don't even think they were top 10 players. They're like top 15 players at the time, maybe top 20 players. But PewFat basically shattered this rule and shattered the expectations, which in itself was very, very, very impressive. But then also, in terms of their singles performances over the years, I mean, if you literally just look at the NorCal Power Rankings, first of all, for me mentioning Shroomed, no one's got a better winning record against Shroomed probably in the world than SFAT. SFAT was the guy that SFAT is basically the reason Shroomed stopped playing Dr. Mario. And like with Shroomed, where he had that period where he was ranked top 10 in singles in the world with his Dr. Mario, like very early on. With PewPew and SFAT, I'm not sure they quite had the same peaks in terms of their singles career with like how consistently they were top 8 tournaments, but it really did feel like for a while they were basically either shoo-ins. Like you kind of expect to see either one of them in top 8 of a major or both, and it was very, very common. And they did this for a very, 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 very long time, just like Shroom. I mean, if you literally go to the NorCal Power Rankings page on SSB Wiki, which is a very fun website, and you scroll down, I mean, you're going to see one of 3 names at the top of basically all of these rankings, with the exception, of course, of Spark being number 1 right now. And this is, of course, with SFAT being, I think this ranking was made when SFAT was back in SoCal. But, it's like, PewPew number 1, right? PewPew number 1, PewPew, here's Shroomed. And there's a long period where SFAT had basically already left NorCal, right? SFAT was in SoCal for a while. Shroomed, PewPew trading spots. Then you go back now. This is back when SFAT was in NorCal, and he's back in NorCal now, but he was gone for a couple years. SFAT, PewPew SFAT, PewPew SFAT Shroom, PewPew SFAT Shroom, PewPew SFAT Shroom, always PewPew SFAT Shroom. Basically, you would never see a rankings where it wasn't, and they were solidly above the rest, like solidly above the rest. Like it was, like the gap between them and the next person the next people down, like it was a very, very solid gap. Because you would have kind of the top 50, top 100 representation skill level right below that, but they would be top 20, top 15, pushing top 10 skill tier. And, they maintained this in spite of other very strong players like Nintendude and Zoo. Sometimes you'd see Nintendude creeping up as high as number 2. But PewPew and SFAT, you basically expected to see them win most locals. You expect to see them do the best at majors. And of course, they're the best in teams. Spark is crazy. Face Roll is in SoCal. Face Roll has never lived in NorCal. So, yeah. Yeah, and PewPew, like, I think just in terms of his gameplay contributions, I think A lot of people really like watching PPU. He's got a really, really cool playstyle. You gotta, everyone knows that set where he beat Hungry Box at Apex 2015. Really legendary set. And then you've got like, there were definitely periods where I felt like, while PPU would go a little bit inactive, like right now, for example, where he's kind of retired, SFAT is someone who has just had this incredible work ethic through the entirety of his career. I mean, I remember when Folsom Street Foundry was a thing, aka The Foundry. Literally every week, SFAT #1. I mean, SFAT must have won The Foundry like probably 100+ times. He went every week without fail, stayed sober, and beat the brakes off of Kid Boogie and Nintendo. It was like some of the hardest I've ever seen someone dominate their local. And he went every week, super duper consistent. And that's just kind of SFAT to me, is like incredible work ethic as a player. He's going to Riptide this weekend. I'm expecting him to do really well. Probably gonna top 8 it. And yeah, I mean, with as long as he's kind of ruled NorCal with an iron fist, up there with PPU and Shroomed, it just wouldn't make sense for those three to not be at the top of this list. Okay, so now there's 2 more slots, right? And who am I gonna give them to? The other 2 greatest players in NorCal's history. One of those is the player, in my opinion, and I think, not even in my opinion, I think it's backed up by just the rankings. The #1 NorCal player, when I got into Melee myself in 2008, I think this one for me is a little bit close because I could see this one going in a lot of different ways, but this guy was basically emblematic and representative of what NorCal Melee was at the very, very highest level. You can look no further than the famous set where the phrase was first uttered, and I'm going to unmute.
This is Silent Spectre versus Mango right here. This is mad serious. They're trying to get 70% of the $45. Let's go.
The 70% of the $45 was between, of course, Mango and Silent Spectre. And Silent Spectre, we look back now and we say, okay, of course Mango was better than Silent Spectre. I mean, Mango was Mango. But you guys got to realize, like, there was an actual SoCal-NorCal rivalry for a little while when Mango was still getting good. And Jeff, or Silent Spectre, who is going to be my... Hang on a minute. There we go. Who is going to be my #4, Silent Spectre. Silent Spectre was very much the hope of NorCal in a, very similar way to, I think, what Mango represented for SoCal back then. It sounds a little weird to talk about Mango this way now because I think Mango, people don't even really think of Mango as being like, I mean, obviously he's SoCal, but like Mango came to basically represent, well, Melee on pretty much a global level. First the USA, of course, against Armada. And, at this point where we've kind of, the borders have been blurred to such, I think Mango, is just kind of Melee. Mango's just Mr. Melee. But back then, there was a real SoCal-NorCal rivalry. And if you watch the old Waffle 77 videos, Homemade Waffle's old channel, there was that narrative was very clear. And at a lot of the majors back then too, a lot of hope and faith was placed on Silent Spectre. Everyone knew the one guy that everyone in NorCal wanted Silent Spectre to do really well at all the majors. And, it was this big thing because I remember Genesis 1, for example, Silent Spectre underperformed, got 25th. It was very sad. And they're like, see, Dark Rain, of course Dark Rain's better. The Dark Rain was East Coast. You would Dark Rain, the Falcon of the East. You'd Silent Spectre, the Falcon of the West. And not only did Dark Rain outplace him, but Hax and Scar also outplaced him, right? And then Pound 4, a couple months after that, and Silent Spectre did super duper well, beat Armada. And of course, that's a legendary set in and of itself where you really aren't looking at too many people lifetime who are beating Armada. It just so turns out that didn't happen very often. And then Silent Spectre ends up top 8ing that tournament. And then, people, West Coast is popping off, NorCal's popping off. Silent Spectre is a player that I think over the years, he played. There were other people that I was debating putting in this slot. One of those players is actually Pink Shinobi, who at the time of Genesis 1 was actually ranked above Silent Spectre. Silent Spectre was actually #2 in NorCal. And Pink Shinobi, Peach player, was #1. But in a similar manner to how I'm going to put someone like Shroomed over someone like Spark. Okay, that's a little bit more of an extreme example. But Pink Shinobi basically became #1 and then kind of retired soon after that. Like, he was only really at the very top of the rankings for a pretty short time when you really get down to it. And while he did very, very well within region, Pink Shinobi didn't really have any dominant performances at majors the way Silent Spectre did. Silent Spectre was going to majors, going to nationals, not only in California, but across the country and doing well. Whereas someone like Pink Shinobi, like, he had strong performances, don't get me wrong, but, you know, I just, there were not nearly as many legendary Pink Shinobi sets. In fact, the most legendary Pink Shinobi sets, in my mind, are the ones where he timed out Rock Croc on Donkey Kong 64. That's the one everyone remembers. And the one where Mango went Sheik against him, beat him with Sheik with a wall jump forward air. Like, when I think of, like, famous Pink Shinobi sets, I'm thinking of him camping out a Ganon on a band stage and getting swagged on by Mango's Sheik. So, like, whereas when I think Silent Spectre, you know, there's so many famous sets that come to mind. One of the first being Silent Spectre versus Armada. So I think just with that factor alone, Silent Spectre is going to be the number 4 player on this list. And yeah, he was fucking incredible. He played Falcon in a very, very, very weird style, you know, relative to now, but he had a lot of really interesting techniques that I think still really, like, people aren't super duper good at. His ability to kind of, like, use, you know, Falcon's a character whose frame data on some of his moves isn't the best. Knee's a little bit slow, Stomp's a little bit slow. So Silent Spectre is definitely a player who was able to use these slower moves, but in conjunction with Falcon's really tricky movement, with how slow Falcon falls when he doesn't fast fall, but how fast Falcon falls when he does fast fall. And he would literally just win neutral with big moves in really, really weird, bonkers ways. I love hearing Scar talk about Silent Spectre, because Scar's perspective on it was like, you know, Scar was already a top Falcon at that point, but to him, Dark Rain was his favorite, of course, because he's East Coast. And then when he watched Dark Rain, everything made sense. When he watched Silent Spectre, nothing made sense. And so he would try to emulate Silent Spectre, and it just wouldn't work. Like, it was, you know, it was almost as big of a dichotomy in a different way. You know, people talk about Wizrobe and Nun. Obviously, Dark Rain isn't exactly like Wizzy, and Silent Spectre isn't exactly like Nun. But it's kind of that kind of parallel. Just to paint a picture for you guys that weren't around back then. But if you go back and watch some of his matches, you'll see what I mean. It's very, very interesting playstyle, and I don't think anybody plays like that today. And the last person I have to put on this list, and, you know, to be perfectly honest with you, I was torn on this one. I was torn on this one because, you know, I, of course, as you guys know, as an ex-resident of San Jose, there was a player that I used to play a lot, Captain Falcon player from San Jose, who's incredibly good and, you know, had a lot of epic sets, had a lot of really, really crazy techniques that they used. Of course, I'm talking about Lord, but Lord is not going to be the number 5 on this list because I just don't think at the end of the day I can rightfully put Lord on a top 5 all-time NorCal list when he just didn't go to enough tournaments. He's number 1 on the honorable mentions for sure. And playstyle-wise, I would love to put him in terms of the top, solidly in the top 5. But unfortunately, I just don't ever think tournament performances were quite a priority for this guy. Now, I don't think tournament performances were necessarily a top priority for the player that is going to be number 5 on my list. Not number 5 per se, but the player's going to round the list out. But of course, I'm talking about Isaiah. I can't have a top 5 NorCal all-time list if I don't have Isaiah on the list. Isaiah is from a different era, and if you go all the way back to the earliest iterations of the NorCal Power Rankings, of course, he was the number 1 player. And I mean, Isaiah was fucking crazy. If you played back then, he was already, you guys got to realize, I'm kind of old school. I started playing in 2008. Isaiah was already on the way out when I started playing. Like, he came to one Washington tournament, and he, like, played Fish in bracket, and, like, he, like, went Fox against Fish. Like, it was, you know, I mean, he had a Fox, don't get me wrong. It was kind of sick. But, like, he really didn't go to that many tournaments already, and he was way more focused on Smash 64 at that point. But the legacy that he left on Melee as a whole was ridiculous. And you could talk to anyone from back then where it was like, dude, this was one of the guys that was really paving a way. First of all, paving the way for his character for sure. I mean, he was the only Captain Falcon for a long time. He was literally the only Captain Falcon worth watching for a long, long time. Super duper ahead of the game. Super duper ahead of the curve in his for his character. You know, he was top, 5 worldwide. Some people low-key wanted to call him the best in the world. Captain Jack was a player who I met in Japan, who got to play extensively with Ken and Isaiah when they were in Japan. And Captain Jack told me that he felt like Isaiah And of course, this is the meme at this point. Is Isaiah going to try and all this stuff? But Captain Jack told me that he thought Isaiah was just the best. He thought Isaiah, if he wanted to win, was the best. And you couldn't, like he felt like he was the, like, Ken had the results. I almost want to think of it in terms of like, if you want to draw a parallel to another pairing or another duo on this list, you look at PewFat, where, Pew feels like he's got more raw talent for melee. The guy can play 25 out of, he can play basically every character in the entire game at a very, very high level. He's got a lot of crazy movement and crazy reads and looks super flashy. And you can tell that, he lives and breathes melee. And then you have SFAT, who basically had the work ethic, enters all the tournaments, always tries his hardest, doesn't quite have it doesn't feel like he's as talented in terms of like natural talent as Pew. Had to work a lot harder to get to his skill level, but had that work ethic, right? And I don't know if it's quite the same parallel per se, because Ken was obviously super talented as well. Don't get me wrong, but it feels like there's a little bit of a parallel there where, Ken had the tournament results and he went to a lot of tournaments and was very solidly just the king of Smash. He dominated the game. But a lot of the players from back then, were very much inspired by Isaiah on an unreal level. So it just doesn't make sense to make a top 5 NorCal list and leave Isaiah out. So as much as I would want to put players like Lord on the list, Zoo I was considering, and I think Zoo definitely is an argument for it. But when I think about Zoo and where he got good, I feel like Zoo is more of a SoCal player in a weird way. Because for Zoo's most active years, when he was putting up the most dominant performances in majors, he was SoCal. So, well, really, that's just the justification I want to use to not have to think about it. Your mileage may vary. I don't know that Zoo would displace any of the 5 players I put on this list. It's kind of hard to make a top 5 NorCal list and leave out any of Isaiah. You got to have a pretty strong argument to leave out Isaiah, Silent Spectre, Pew, SFAT, or Shroom. To me, it's like kind of just you can kind of close the book on it. I feel like it's pretty set in stone. I could hear arguments for other players, but I just feel like it'd be hard to displace one of those players. But the honorable mentions definitely would be Lord, for sure. Zoo, and of course there've been great players that, like Cactuar's lived in NorCal for years and years and years and years at this point. But I don't know that I would put Cactuar. I feel like Cactuar would be in a top 5 Philadelphia, like top 5 Philly. Spark, I could see the argument for example. Rocky, if he kept playing, well, I mean, Rocky definitely still plays. I think he literally might have won a tournament last night or got second. I don't know who won between him and Bobby Big Balls. But the King for sure. Dan, the King would be. See, the reason the King doesn't make the list is because I think the King was active at the same time Isaiah was. And so the King definitely would be on the top 10 list. I think the top 10 list goes my top 5. So Shroomed, SFAT, Pew, Silent Spectre, and Isaiah. And then it would be like the King, Lord, Zoo, Spark, and I'm not going to put Scar. I'm not going to put Cactuar. I'm not going to put Nintendo. I'm not going to put players that move to the region. Me personally, I would want to put Lucian, but Lucian is the same problem with Lord where I feel like he didn't enter tournaments for long enough. Fucking Lucian, I hate. Falcomus did that one tournament with Shiz. But like, I don't know, dog. If I'm being real, like, it really was just that one tournament with Shiz, right? I don't know. Falcomus is pretty good. Don't get me wrong. He's like pretty good. But I'd rather put Daryl over Falcomus. Like, I'd literally put Daryl for his ROM 7 performance or whatever. Mitchell Tang. Yeah, okay, once we're getting to this tier. Right, sorry. Tang, of course, Mitchell Tang, the best player in the world, according to Phil. I would love to put Tang in my top 10. But, now we're getting into some very murky waters where there's a lot of people that you could really put on there. Laudandis got fucking 5th at a major. How many of the players that we're naming actually got top 5 at an actual super major? Maybe Laudandis is top 10. I'd probably put Laudandis over fucking who else is on this list? Or the top 10 list. Who's on the top 10 list? Lunin almost beat Armada. Yeah, Lunin, because he camped Armada on Pokefloats and then fucking choked. So he should be top 10. And he Silent Spectre and made him really mad that one time. Daryl was jacked. The top 20 list goes crazy, by the way. The top 20 list fucking goes crazy. But I feel like you probably gotta put, it probably is Laudandis, actually, when you think about it. If you're doing Zoo, then 6 through 10 is Lord, the King, Zoo. I'll do Zoo because he's from NorCal. Spark, And yeah, it's got to be Loud Dadis. Hey, that's it for today's video. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. And listen, I've got a goal of having more subscribers on YouTube than Hugs86. And if you'd like to help me achieve that goal, then just make sure you click that subscribe button down below. Thanks so much and see you next time.